I know some people would say that, but I think that couldn't be more untrue with medicine. So I think in medicine, there was a study done by Mike Dickstein at Stanford where he found that, very related to what Eric was saying, most doctors, if you look at the time series of what do they prescribe in terms of antidepressants to patients, there's a huge effect of if I had a bad experience with an antidepressant with one patient, then I never prescribe it to anyone again, which is completely crazy, right? Because of course we know that these things all have bad effects and good effects and whatever, and so the doctors are learning based on this incredibly tiny sample. And what the heck do you need a doctor for anyway to prescribe this stuff to you? What you should be doing, obviously, is pooling all the data together, having some centralized researchers do research on it, and then have an iPad tell you what you should, do. I mean, that's what we do in so many industries that work so much more efficiently than the medical industry does. It seems pretty strongly to me that it has to do with someone has the industry by its balls, basically, that it's so inefficient and failing to take advantage of the technology. Yeah, Mike.
Could there be this could be kind of running along with your idea that it's another ideology that you need another human being to tell you what you should do about curing your illness rather than a computer or some sort of system?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. It's if people say, but my medical thing is the most private part of my life. Yeah, and you're willing to go search for porn on Google. And you don't go and get, someone. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that people do on Google where it's not controlled by this clique, right? Yeah, I know, exactly. There's all these areas that are incredibly private of people's lives that they don't need someone to sit there and hold their hand through, right? So, yeah, I think that's a great point, Mike. Okay. Rishank, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was wondering, to sort of talk about the rise of healthcare costs. Can a lot of the rise of healthcare costs be explained by the income elasticity? As we get richer, we will demand more healthcare. I think there's some truth to that, but I think that the fact that the costs, even for the same services, have failed to come down, that would help partially offset those natural effects is not only a result of this problem. There are other problems, but I think this problem is one of the main impediments. And to get back to Chrissy's point, so about the chiropractors and so forth. So my wife, when I first was going out with her, got hit by a car in Southern California, and she got rushed to the hospital. And she wasn't that hurt. She just had a little cut on her lip, and she needed 3 or 4 stitches. But because in California it's illegal to put stitches into someone unless you have gone through 4 years of undergraduate, 3 years of medical school, a residency, and a specialty, she spent 5 hours waiting to get a few stitches in her lips, and got an infection that was far, far worse than the problem of her lip bleeding a little bit. So there are real consequences to society of these things that make it illegal for someone to do stuff that obviously isn't even really correlated in its ability with having gone through 11 years of training. That requires steady hands. It has nothing to do with being a doctor. Yeah, go ahead.
Isn't a more important reason of this rising medical care costs are the structure of health insurances, that there is no competition because most of the people that go to doctors are insured, they don't shop for cheaper price. So there is nothing forcing the doctors to bring them down.
I mean, possibly, but the insurance companies do have some bargaining power, and they try to push these things down. And whether competition versus regulation is a better way to keep down costs is something we'll explore later in the course. But okay, so for the purpose of this class, the reason I had you read this was that there are tons of ideas that Friedman uses that we're going to be studying throughout the course. One of those is, that if the problem is the lack of information that the market would provide, it's better to do certification than also to do, licensure, which isn't directly targeted at that problem. Another issue is what we usually in economics call revealed preference, how we can infer information about people's intentions from their actions. And that's related to this discussion we were having about who's lobbying for this stuff. We'll talk about the monopoly distortion and the incentives that a monopolist has to restrict quantities. We'll talk about why it's more important to protect consumers than producers because of these diffuse incentives in lecture 14 when we talk about competition policy. We'll talk about the collective action problem itself when we talk about public goods. And there are lots of other concepts in the course that show up at various points in the Friedman article that you can sort of think about as we go through it. Okay, so I think that this sort of logic is exciting. I think it's powerful. But a natural question is this actually science that I think a lot of economists ask? And the Hillary Putnam piece I had you read to help reflect on what is science like. I think the real problem is that a lot of people who end up in the social sciences took science classes in middle school, maybe in high school, and then sort of stopped taking them then. And so they got a view of science which is really not realistic. And then they want economics to conform to that view of science, which is not how science actually is. And I thought this Putnam piece would help you think a little bit about this. So Putnam tries to sort of critique or dialogue with three different views of science. And Jingqi Liang here? No? Guess not. So the three views are inductivism, Popper falsificationism, and Kuhn's view of paradigm shifts. And Andre, what is inductivism?
I read this book by Steve, and it's the fact that you see something repeating itself doesn't mean that you can claim that it repeats itself again.
No, so inductivism is the view that you should do that. It's anti-inductivism. That's what you just said. So
Popper's like, what, so anti-inductivism is it?
Popper's position, yeah. So inductivism is basically the view of science you learned in middle school. It's basically you generate theories, you go out there and you do a test of them, you confirm the theory, you repeat or you get another hypothesis from that, you test it, etc. And then you apply confirmed theories to produce technologies, basically. Now, what is Popper's disagreement with that view? Eric? Yeah.
So, I'm not entirely sure, but I think he argues that, basically, first off, induction is, never deductively true. He never actually proves something inductively. And he says that scientists don't actually do this. What they actually do is they disprove theories, disprove other possibilities by conducting experiments, and then by conducting experiments, they can limit which theories are possible.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So he claims that really what you're doing is not proving that a theory is true, but proving that theories are false. And that if a theory has survived a bunch of tests, that doesn't say anything about how valid it is. It simply says that it has not yet been proven false. What about Kuhn? Yike is not here, right? Does anyone else want to try to explain what Kuhn's view of science was? Yeah, Jim.
Basically, theories aren't necessarily falsifiable. They just are trying to provide a theory to explain something, and then you can only come up with perhaps a better theory, but you can't really ever prove or disprove.
Yeah, that's right. So Kuhn said that theories are fundamentally unfalsifiable, and that what science is about is not testing theories in any sense, either falsifying them or confirming them. It's about making the data fit the theory, not the theory fit the data. So that is, it's about using a language of a theory to explain various different phenomena by bringing various assumptions that connect the theory with the real world to bear to help explain what's going on. And then, in fact, that there's no criterion for comparing theories because they're like two different languages. It's sort of like saying, is English or or Spanish better? Well, they're really just two different ways of saying similar things. And so there's no way to fundamentally compare theories. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you mean by theories are unfalsifiable? Because clearly, say in physics itself, you have say a couple of competing theories, and if you just do the experiments and you really see theory A does not work, it's only theory B that seems to be working so long. So
Hold that thought. So the goal of the next, you didn't read the Putnam piece, did you? No. That's fine. You'll see in a second. He's going to respond to exactly that critique. That's what the next slide is going to be all about. But Edward, did you have a question first, or?
Oh yeah, I just
Yeah.
really wanted to address that.
Yeah.
I think it's like the theory works, but there's a part of it that can be falsified. But like in the end, the theory like.
Well, yeah, we're gonna talk a lot about this on the next thing. So Kuhn's claim is that the way that theories get replaced is only when a new theory comes along, and even then, it doesn't really replace the old theory in people's mind. It doesn't get tested and confirmed. Instead, what basically happens with new theories is that the people who believed in the old theory die off, and the people who grew up learning the new theory get mature, and they become, and then that basically is the way that theories get replaced. So Putnam thinks that Kuhn is too radically subjectivist. He thinks that this is too just like, oh, science is just bullshit. But he basically thinks that he has the right understanding of what's going on in science. And he tries to clarify Kuhn's critique of the first two and put it on a slightly more objective foundation. So the first thing that Putnam does is he tries to discard Popper's argument against the inductivist. He says that it's absurd to say that theories are just not falsified rather than confirmed, because the truth is that most of what we do with theories is not just admire them as being potentially true but not yet proved. It's we actually use them to do all sorts of things like make rockets, make computers, et cetera, et cetera. So we wouldn't do that unless we thought the theory was actually being shown true by the series of things that it had gone through. So it's just not, as sort of a matter of revealed preference, true that we don't confirm theories when we put them through all these tests. But the main critique that Putnam has is not of Popper versus the inductivists. It's of both Popper and the inductivists. It's thinking that both of them have the wrong view of what's actually going on in science, which is sort of what Kuhn was saying. And he says the reason is that even the best theories, even the most rigorous theories, even the one that Isidunias was saying are very falsifiable, very testable, actually make no predictions whatsoever on their own. And the example that he gives is Newton's theory of universal gravitation, which is, it's hard to think of a more canonical scientific theory than that one. So if we can't prove that that is falsifiable, it's going to be pretty hard to think that any scientific statement would be. And Ginny, what was Putnam's argument about why the universal theory of gravitation was not falsifiable?
You never know, something made it for something. You can't, there's no experiment.
No, it was much stronger than that. He had a very clear argument about why the theory was is not falsifiable, and in fact, the reason why we believe in it has nothing to do with tests of the theory. Andre?
The auxiliary statements that are necessary to make it work.
Can you unpack that a little bit more so people who didn't read the article understand?
Like when you have the laws of gravitation, or
Yeah.
you need some basic statements like, oh, it works in a vacuum. There are no other bodies that are interacting with those
Yeah.
two. So you simplify it and make it the theory work only with this.
Yeah. So what Andre is referring to is that the way that people came to believe in the theory of gravitation was not through a test. The way that people came to believe in the laws of gravitation is that they explained Kepler's laws. Now let's suppose for the moment, which isn't true, that we didn't know Kepler's laws before we came to believe in the theory of gravitation.